Talk over drink.
Talks over drinks.
Okay, we're live again, once again. Welcome to another episode of Talks Over Drinks. My name is Corey Fauconier, and as always, my partner in justice, the guy Markel Prines. Markel, how are you today?
I'm good, brother. I've been looking forward to this interview right here. I had a couple of minutes earlier to do a little bit of research. I wish I had more time, but I'm looking forward to this.
Definitely. You have a thought of the day for the folks before we get started?
Absolutely. I actually pulled out my book for this one. It's something I've written a while back, but I don't think I ever used it before. It says, one of the worst symptoms of a disease is the one called blame. What makes it so bad is that it can kill the person it was given to, and the person that gave it believes they will be cured of the disease if they spread it.
Wow. All right. Well, blame. We don't want to lay any blame. So definitely want to just move on to the
accountability.
Right. Blame and accountability. You have my brother of another color all the way from Germany, Jeff Kleb. Jeff, how are you this evening? I know it's late for y'all over in Germany. How's everything going?
That's a little after 10 p.m. our time. We're 6 hours ahead of Virginia time. Things are going well over here. I live outside of Frankfurt. I retired so I could move over here with my wife. She's an attorney and works for the U.S. government. So I'm a house husband now. It's just us and our two cats. I have one grown son, two grown stepdaughters, and my son and his fiance have a baby boy due on October 24th. So I'm going to be a grandpa pretty soon. Or as they would say in Germany, an Opa.
Okay, so, Opa. That's what it is.
Different. Yeah.
Yes.
Different.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I know how cute Corey's grandkids are and how much, he posts little pictures of them and all that stuff. And, I never met anybody who has a dog who wears clothes, but I always like to see Eva's adventures. We just have our 13-year-old cat sisters here with us, and you might see one of them come up next to me. That they rule the house, and I love dogs. Cats are easier. I love dogs too. But anyway, welcome aboard, Sandy Sanders, and welcome, Kenrick. I keep wanting to call you Kenneth. But anyway, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say tonight.
Pause on that one.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, Sandy, you still with us? We have our attorney and brother in Christ and everybody's favorite Nazarene attorney, Sandy Sanders. Sandy, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing pretty well, and I thank Jesus for that, of course, because that's outside of my bailiwick. Health is something we are blessed with and not entitled to.
That's right.
But I was going to make I wasn't going to say anything, but since everybody's brought up dogs and cats, I was going to make the observation that it looked like last week that Kristi Noem was probably the inside pick for Trump's running mate, but since it turned out that she killed that dog, sort of premeditatedly,
wow,
I think she's out because you could be a communist or something, but you can't kill a dog.
Can't kill a dog.
You can't kill Old Yeller.
I don't even know what the story is with that.
Yeah,
I think
I heard that. I heard that, Corey. I don't know what the deal was with killing the dog, but it looked like it was a German wire hair pointer. Those are a purebred dog, and they're not cheap to get. That's what it looked like to me, a German wire hair pointer.
I didn't hear anything about the story. Can somebody enlighten me?
I didn't hear about that either.
Yeah, but those are generally very expensive dogs. It's like an Australian Shepherd or something, Those aren't dogs that you just find at the pound. I don't know anything about. I did hear that she did kill the dog. I don't know anything about it, and I thought she was on the short list for VP, but I think that's gonna, if this is true that she did that, it's gonna knock her out.
Was this her dog?
What?
Whose dog was it?
I think it was her family dog.
Yeah.
Oh. Wow.
So,
I didn't read the story except what I read on X, and probably can't take X too seriously, but it didn't appear that I was reading anything to say no, clarification, didn't mean that, all of that. I think it has boosted it's boosted probably Ben Carson and or Tulsi Gabbard or somebody
Tulsi
like that.
Gabbard.
Well,
I think Tulsi.
I like her. She's great. And I like Dr. Carson. In fact, I voted for him in the primary in 2016.
If you may, let me give Kenrick his proper introduction so the folks at home know who he is. We are interviewing this afternoon Mr. Kenrick Morgan. He is the founder of the Black Gun Initiative. So we welcome you today, Kenrick. Thank you very much for taking some time to talk to us. Did you want to start us off with anything you wanted to say, even if it's outside of the information about your group?
No, I'm definitely happy to be here. Anytime I get in a space where the message can be forwarded, I'm all for it. Even more than that, anytime it's positive energy, progressive energy, for me, that's something that I'm always ready to be a part of.
Okay.
I think ultimately, like in these days, getting next to or being in the presence of other like-minded, progressive thinking individuals is something that we all should strive to do, especially when they're doing some good things and, always try to build. That's the big thing for me.
Right.
Side note about the thing with the dog. That dog, I think she had said something about it was a hunting dog that kind of was bad behaved or whatever the case may be, was really aggressive. I don't know 100%. I think it came from an excerpt from a book or something, but it was a hunting dog. And that breed that the guy called out, I think that's actually what it was. But I think the story was that the dog was bad behaved and they ended up putting the dog down, or she ended up shooting the dog because it was hyper aggressive, something to that.
Okay. Well, like I said, we're dog lovers in my house. We had one dog that we unfortunately had to put down in our time because he was aggressive. So definitely would like to read more about the story. So my first question to you, Kenrick, is can you tell our viewers how the Black Gun Initiative came into existence? What prompted you to create the group?
Okay. Well, myself, I've been a person that's been kind of lived the life of a preparedness lifestyle for this been at least going on 20-something years of really being focused on preparedness in all aspects. I call it totality of preparedness. And really part of that was the personal defense thing. And in our community, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
So for me, the firearm was pretty much the police or the bad guy. That's pretty much what it came down to. And then once I started to get older and become more informed with the Second Amendment and things of that nature, understanding your rights, it became like a personal mission for me. But then I would pass anyone, and if you got into a conversation with me, I would start talking about it. And I kept getting here like, hey, why don't you do that? Like, give the information, because one of the biggest issues in our community when it comes to the Second Amendment, firearms, and ultimately protecting yourself and your family is the lack of information. The lack of information, trying to get away from the stigmas associated with the firearm. So ultimately for me, when I created the group, I just wanted to be that resource where people could come to get the information. When you're in this, there's a lot of hardline stances. So with that comes a lot of intimidation, where people don't want to ask because they're afraid to ask the questions because they don't know. And then, if you've been in these circles, these two-way circles a lot, you would know that sometimes it can get it's almost like politics. It can get very heavy on one side or another. So for me, I just wanted to kind of create a space that was more comfortable for people to come in and be able to get the information without having to feel intimidated by by asking a question. Because then, like I said, in our group, our community, that's the biggest problem.
Okay, Markel, you have a question?
Yes. So along with that, the one other thing that I noticed and I really like is the business aspect of it, that you created a whole business around it.
Right.
And I was looking at the site and you kind of mentioned the preparedness part. And I like the quote right off top when I was scrolling through. It's a movement. It's about more than just the gun. It's about the totality of preparedness. It's a lifestyle.
Right.
So I like the fact, me from my standpoints of entrepreneurship and online business, I look at things like that when I'm looking at different businesses online. So I kind of look and critique different things as I go along, websites and stuff like that. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, that's catchy. And I saw that it's a Shopify store that you set up.
Yeah, I have a Shopify store. I'm actually in the process of kind of expanding that because initially I wasn't going to do anything. But as I started to kind of, because I used to, well, I still am, I started my business in trucking. So Corey would know that I done a lot of that. That was kind of my business when I was actually on the road. Now that I kind of transitioned off and was kind of segueing doing more of the training and stuff, listen, we all are hustlers. So, in your mind, you're like, okay, I need to find out a way to make it not just get the information out, but also being able to, monetize it. And so for me, I used to say totality of preparedness all the time. And my one of the slogans for the group is life choice and lifestyle. But it wasn't more than just being catchy, but it's also actually living that. Because, ultimately, when you're in these things and you make a decision about wanting to accept your duty to protect yourself and your family, obviously that's a choice you make, but that has to come with the lifestyle that you live. I can't say, hey, yeah, I want to do this, but then you don't do the training, you don't take the classes, you don't do those things that goes along with it. So for me, the message had to be one where, hey, if you're deciding on doing this, the commitment, you have to dedicate to that commitment. And a lot of times I get people who kind of halfway. They want to, hey, I want to protect myself and my family, right? Or like I always give a example in the class. If you ask anybody, even us on this Zoom call here, what are you willing to do to protect yourself and your family? The common answer is whatever it takes, right?
Amen.
That
That's
answer
right.
that answer is like twofold. It's literal, but on the other end, I always say that's kind of the built-in excuse we give, because then I ask you, okay, well, after you said that, what are the next things have you done? And if those things don't match up to that statement, then you're not willing to do whatever it takes. We're going to say whatever it takes, but then I say, well, have you taken any classes? Have you educated your family? Have you done this? And I would tell people, the gun, the knife, anything, those are all tools. Your mentality about preparedness and the protecting and defending yourself, that's a mentality more than any singular object that you're going to use. And just trying to get people to understand. Now, I use the acronym Black Gun Initiative because obviously in the gun world, Black Gun that's kind of the thing, that's the almost demonized thing in the firearm community, but also in our community, initiating them to get to the firearm or to understand, because we have a very real lack of firearm literacy in the Black community. So for me, that was what it was that kind of prompted me to go in that direction.
That's fine. Jeff, did you have a question for Kenrick?
Yes, sir. I went to your Facebook page and I scrolled through it. I really think that you had a good thing going where you were talking about the safety initiative. You had that class full of young boys and you were like,
oh, yes, yes.
What do you stop, don't touch, leave the area, find an adult, find somebody else. That really struck a chord with me. And I like the one where you had the girl disassembling the 9mm handgun, right, and putting it back together. And I think, being the token white guy here, I can't have a firearm here in Germany, but in the United States, I have my share of them that are being safely stored with relatives. But I used to love it when I'd go to the shooting range, and it was kind of weird. I would go on certain days, I was the only white guy there. And it was people of color and women who were learning how to exercise their Second Amendment rights. And some people say, well, you don't want black people to have Second Amendment. Yes, I do. I want everybody, every American citizen. I'm a big Second Amendment guy. And with rights come responsibility. And when I see people going to the range, they're practicing the safety rules. They're learning how to protect and defend themselves, because people in the quote unquote communities of color are far more likely to be the victim of a violent crime. And if they're able to protect and defend themselves, that's a good thing for all of us, no matter what color you are. So I'm all for it. I took my son to the range when he was 10 years old. He now has a concealed carry permit. He owns a couple guns and he's been a responsible citizen. But I used to tell him, always assume a gun is loaded. And to this day, if I hand him a pistol, the first thing he does is clear it. If it's a revolver, he'll open the cylinder. If it's a semi-auto, he'll clear it. And that prevention of accidents is so crucial. And I'm glad you seem, from what I saw on your Facebook page, you seem to be taking a positive role in that. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, listen, I appreciate that too, because that is one of the biggest, that is the biggest. You know, one thing I always tell people in the class, I could show someone how to shoot a firearm in about 30 minutes, literally. But that does not mean that you are proficient. So, you know, understanding the rules, understanding the safety aspects, and that is one of the biggest things that we're going through right now. So you kind of see my message kind of turns. Before I was more putting out there like, hey, get your firearm, things of that nature. But now the responsibility is telling people that your duty goes past just ownership. Because let's be real. If you're a law-abiding citizen, that is the easiest thing in the whole process to do, is actually purchase a firearm. Mm-hmm. If you're a law-abiding citizen and in a state that allows it. The duty comes when the classes that you take, or in the safety aspects of what's going on. And those are the things that I'm right now continuously driving. We're actually in the process of creating like a free class for you bought a firearm into your home. What now? How does that look for everyone? Because one of the big things is people buy firearms. It becomes this compartmentalized. Like I have it. So now you don't take your kids and listen. Once you inject that firearm into your home, it becomes a part of your family structure to certain degrees. And this is where, you know, people always ask me, hey, when is the right time to teach kids about firearms? If you decide to bring that firearm into your home, that is the time where you need to educate them. Now, there's levels to it, because obviously we know our kids. My son was been around firearms since, my son will be 21. He probably started shooting when he was about 8.
Wow.
So for me, he's been around it where someone would see me deal with my son with a firearm and he's good to go, but he's been around that a long time. And it used to shock people, especially when he was like 12, 13 and things of that nature, his handling and stuff like that, because I stress the safety aspect. Because again, you know, our kids, we can't exalt our kids on one hand and say how smart and how great they are, but then you stick the firearm in front of them and all of a sudden they can't learn. They don't know, oh my God, you know, things of that nature. And, you know, I have these debates, and at some point I may invite you all to a Zoom meeting, because sometimes I get families on about that, because like I tell them, you would take your child to DMV, straight out there getting their license, and put them on a highway next to you, Corey, in your 18-wheeler.
Yes, sir. Before
they would take them to go get a firearm training class. Not realizing that really, in a controlled environment, I can control teaching them that handgun much more so than they can be controlled on that highway next to you on 95.
Yes, sir.
But we don't think about it. We'll have them on Facebook Live. Oh, new driver, blah, blah, blah. And you're on the road with them. But to give them a firearm lesson, no, he's not ready for that. He's not prepared for that. But you can't control it. Yes.
And you made a good point with that. Another thing I might add on to what you were saying about new drivers and everything, teaching your kid a firearm safety, even if you don't like guns, is of paramount importance. Because how many times a teenager will be at I was worried my son would be at his friend's house. Hey, I got my dad's gun. And my son could be like, wait a minute, you got to clear it and make sure there's not a round in there. Because I was always afraid that they'd be somewhere and they would take the magazine out and there would still be a round in there and then somebody would play with it. So I taught him from 8, 9 years old, like, hey, that's serious business.
That's right. Get around the door. I can give you one even greater. My daughter went with her friend to the mall yesterday. I went over to drop her off at the friend's house. When I got to meet the father, you know what I asked them? Are there firearms in your home? And if so, are they secured? And he took a step back. And then after a while, he was like, yeah, and they secured. And we had a conversation. And afterwards, he was like, damn. He's like, yo, you know, my daughter has other friends has come over and they've never asked those questions. I said, well, you know, the world that we live in now, you have to ask that question because chances are your kids are going somewhere. They are going to come in contact with a firearm. Now, listen, that same daughter, she's not as proficient as my son, but she knows enough to know, hey, firearm, get away. But for me, if I come to you, Corey, and I say, hey, you have firearms in your home, you say yes, but they're either not secure or I don't feel comfortable with your answer, then my child can't come there. And I tell them, it's not. I tell them it's not a slight on you. It's just because everybody runs their home the way they feel fit to do. But me as a parent, I will not inject my child into a space that I don't feel as comfortable with. And too many people do that without unknowingly.
Well, everybody's home is different. Like if my wife and I don't have any children at home, we can keep a loaded firearm on each floor and there's no problem. But if Corey's granddaughter comes to visit or something,
there you go.
Or our grandchild is old enough to walk around, we have to rearrange our way of doing things.
Right.
Yes, it's all making their job.
Sandy, you have a question for Kenrick?
Yeah. First, I want to say hey to Kendrick, and I'm glad to know you. And you seem like a fella I'd love to have lunch with sometime and say hey, just kind of off the clock. But I was going to start out with a joke about the Sullivan Act must be the most broken law in all of history from New York, because I remember when my dad lived in New York City and he had a firearm and I'm sure it was in violation of the Sullivan Act because you had to go through all these hoops to even have a gun, but everybody had one. Finally, that act was either unconstitutional or in Bruin, which was long, long overdue, in my view. Although I think that I see the problems associated. I see the problems associated with that. And there was a brief that was published by my company, and I'm sorry I didn't read it because I think it would have been an interesting brief. And it was by a group of people who were trying to show that gun control laws was originally designed to keep blacks from having firearms so they could defend themselves against the Klan. And related people in the South during Jim Crow. So they didn't want the blacks to have guns. And so I think there's something to be said for that. But I wanted to ask the question, you brought up another issue inadvertently, and that is being an interstate trucker. I think it's dangerous for an interstate trucker to have a gun in his cab because the laws in all the states are so different that you might conceivably be committing a felony or something just by having it in your cab. And it seems like to me, people in interstate conveyance ought to have some kind of uniform law to take care of that. But that's not something that's going to happen anytime soon, I don't think.
No.
Right. Well, for me, when I was on the road, I used to I would be in truck stops educating guys on this subject too. There's no law against having a firearm in a commercial vehicle. That's like one of the big misnomers. I know Corey probably know that, but that's something that I used to have to educate guys with all the time. Your concealed permit or your ability to carry a firearm concealed is transferable to any state that is legal in. Now, you as a concealed carry permit holder are responsible to know the laws where you are and where you're going to go and where you're traveling through. And that becomes the issue that deters some people because they, maybe either they don't want to or they just choose not to. But for me, I was a person, anytime I was on the road, I would not sacrifice my safety for anything. I would tell most people that if you work for a company, it can only be a policy that they don't want you to carry a firearm on a truck that maybe you work for ABC Transportation, and their policy states that they don't want firearms in their vehicle. The worst thing they could ever do is fire you. And I used to tell guys that, at the end of the day, your safety has to be over any single thing that you're doing. Now you have to, obviously you have to live with everything that goes along with it. But, policy and law obviously is two different things. So I used to be a lot in that, because that was one of the biggest misnomers in the trucking industry, is that you could not have a firearm in a commercial vehicle. And there's nothing in the FMCSA whole booklet, and
that's correct,
that says anything about that. So but again, that's one of those things that they put out there, and they know that most people.
Wow. Okay. Well, that is an amazing thing. Of course, it's probably a good time for a disclaimer that none of us are trying to give legal advice, and
exactly.
Should know the laws of your state and municipality about firearms. But I found it I think your thing about safety. Now, I know the NRA is supposed to do safety classes. And I can also tell you that when my son Rhett, who's an Eagle Scout and is now in college, when he took the firearm shooting, the rifle badge, which he thoroughly enjoyed, he loved doing that. Safety was paramount in that situation, and it was part of the merit badge to know the safety. And I almost think that the merit badge about safety ought to be required to have an Eagle Scout, even maybe a first class Scout, because you're right, firearm safety is in a moment somebody finds the handgun and they look at it, they don't know anything about it, and they shoot somebody because of that round that's in the chamber you were talking about. My dad meant well when he said, "Don't touch my gun or you're going to get the worst whipping ever." And I never did touch his gun, but I don't know whether he did that exactly right. I know he's in heaven, so I'll talk to him when I get there, hopefully many years from now. We'll have to talk about that. But
yeah, listen, well, I think that
it worked for me, but it wouldn't have worked for everybody. But wouldn't it have been better if he had said, "Let me see what this gun can do."
Right.
What this gun can do to somebody. And that's why I don't want you to touch it. I want you to know that if you have a situation, you know exactly how to handle it. And I think that could be under teaching. Now, it's interesting. I have a in-law that shoots guns, and Rhett and I were going to go, and I knew Rhett wanted to go. But my daughter Tori surprised everybody when she said, "I want to go too and shoot a gun." So, well, that'll be interesting. And I made the joke about, better call the governor of Illinois, better call out the National Guard or something, because Tori's going to shoot a gun. But she did super well, and she learned a lot. And young women got to think about personal safety all the time.
Let me ask you.
So Kenrick, I admire what you're doing. I didn't research like they did, looking at your webpage and stuff like that, because I do think that there's a place for having that, for having the people, for Black folks talking to other Black folks about guns, and because it is kind of scary.
Let me ask you, Kenrick.
I admire what you're doing, but I would ask the question: don't you think the NRA and some of these other groups, aren't they doing a lot of what you're doing anyway, or are you putting a twist on it that I don't see?
You know what? What I would say is, part of the reason why I started a group is because I think some of those groups have become so big that they become a little detached from more of the grassroots type people, and some become a bit intimidating for people to to get the information. So that's kind of what it is. I mean, all of us, at the end of the day, anybody that's talking about your rights, safety, and your duty to protect yourself and your family, I don't mind whatever group that comes along with it. I mean, sometimes, you know, when you have a big group, there's always a faction of people that may feel excluded, or for whether it's intentional or perceived, you know.
And representation matters.
Say it again.
Representation matters.
Yeah, it does. And so for me, you know, I've been a part of the NRA for almost 20 years, but I know it had a point in time, there were no Black gun initiatives around to have that. And that was one of the reasons why ultimately I did do it, not so much because trying to separate, but I had to empower my community, because our biggest issue in our community is a lack of firearm literacy. There's a lot of guns in our community, but there's not a lot of firearm literacy in our community. So for me, that became like my mission, more like, hey, the guns are there. I know, I grew up around them. The guns are there, but I know that the education and that stuff, and also people knowing the law. The biggest issue we have is the lack of firearm literacy and the law. The law is what get most of our people who are actually law-abiding people in trouble with firearms. Is because, hey, I bought my gun legally. I'm not a criminal. Yeah, but you're in a place that legally you cannot have that firearm. Or you went across some state lines, or you're in a city, whatever the case may be. And this is one that I constantly talk to people about that. Hey, I was in such and such a place. You are not legal to have your firearm there. So, you know, don't say you have your gun legal. Yes, you possess your gun legally, but you can still be illegal. I tell them it's just like any other place that you trespass upon. You're not, you're not doing something. You're not an illegal person. You're not coming to steal something, but if you're in a zone that you're not supposed to be in, that is illegal.
Are you in the market for a new car or home but credit is stopping you? Did you know that a high credit utilization ratio can negatively impact your credit score? Learn how to manage your credit wisely and repair your credit with Luxury Legacy Consulting. Contact us today for credit repairs starting at just $99 a month.
Let me ask you this, Kenrick. Is the group more so for that educational component? Because I know you and I had talked politics during the course of this last session. Have you taken members of the Black Gun Initiative to the state assembly to discuss any type of laws, or are you more so looking for the educational and the safety component of members of the community?
All right. Well, see, for me personally, initially when you get into it, you always tell yourself you don't want to be all politics. But if you're in this, it's inevitable that it will progress to a point where the politics become, because if you're dealing with law, that's politics. So ultimately,
law is politics, isn't it?
Right.
Now I'm the one that has to leave early, and I apologize, Kenrick, for interrupting you.
That's all right.
I just wanted to let you know before I go that I like what you're doing, and I think it's important to remember, and I think it's important for everybody to kind of get away from that guns are creepy. And I think the only way you're going to do that is with education. I think young people of all groups, but especially young Black folks in the inner city, people who are in that situation, are trying to maybe get out of it, but they're still in it. I think they've got to know what's going on. They've got to know what, does somebody have a gun? Is there shooting? And all of that stuff. And so that becomes as much personal safety of just being aware of your surroundings and who you're with and what's going on and things like that. But I think that there's something significant here, because I can see some problems. There are some people who think they are law abiding, but they may not be law abiding. And if they sign that form and they take that gun and they say, I've never been convicted of a domestic crime, a domestic assault. And what does domestic assault mean? I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's a clear delineation. But if you got a guy who at 21 is living with a girl and they get into a fight and it gets rather heated and he pushes her away and she reports him, that's assault and battery, that's domestic assault and battery. And that might affect, even though it's a misdemeanor, it might affect your right to own a gun in the future, because domestic assault is one of those. And what if you like a little cannabis? I'm not advocating the use of cannabis here, but I'm saying, what if you have legal cannabis, but there's a provision that says if you're addicted to, you can't own a firearm. And so, and I know that a lot of that is well-meaning people who want to keep guns out of bad people's hands, but it seems like to me that these laws have become so complicated that it almost intimidates people into knowing whether they can even go and sign that form, because when they sign that form, they're saying, I'm legally allowed to own a gun, and if for any reason it turns out you're not, it's a felony. And they do enforce that felony, at least in some jurisdictions, pretty easily in Virginia. I see people get on the wrong side of that. Forgive me from my soapbox, Corey and Markel. Okay. But maybe Kendrick can talk about that, and then I can hit the road. I apologize.
That's all right. I know you have some stuff to do. We appreciate you being with us. Go ahead, Kendrick.
I apologize for leaving early. It's been wonderful. If you're all right, Kendrick, let's go get a soda.
Yeah. All right.
Nice meeting you, Sandy.
Nice meeting you. Yep. Listen, definitely, like I was telling you, once you get into this, if you're committed to the movement, there it does trend itself to become political, because obviously the law is dealing with politics. So initially, I tried to avoid it, but I knew that ultimately, if I was trying to be a change that I wanted to be, that it would have to come with dealing with the political part of what's going on. Because one of the things we do preach, most people are surface when they come to gun laws. They only know it on a national level, what they see on TV, whether they want to ban this, ban that, whatever the case, and the things that are sensationalized for the news, not realizing that your local ordinances and state laws are going to affect you more on a day-to-day basis.
That's right.
So that's one of the things. And just like in Petersburg, Virginia, where I give the example that during COVID, they had I think it was 2020, they had a ordinance that they put up in Petersburg that you cannot have a firearm in a public place. That is still on the books. I talked to the police chief, and he said they're not enforcing it, but it's still on the books. And it came about, obviously they had the council meeting, but everything was virtual. So they had it, and so you went to bed one night being able to carry your concealed firearm on any public street, the whole thing. But it was almost like a template they used that was from the state, and they just implemented it, and it kind of pretty much outlawed having a firearm in the city of Petersburg.
I ain't know that.
Yeah, listen, I get people with that all the time. That's literally happened overnight, and it's on the books, because we talked to the police chief and he said, well, we're not enforcing it. But not enforcing it and it not being on the books is two different things. Yeah. Because you may not enforce it, but you're going to tell every single officer that's in a patrol car that has to deal with his emotions and that whole thing that's going on there in that city, that when they pull me over or someone else over, and the firearm is in the mix, they're not going to enforce that.
But what happens when the next police chief takes power?
There you go.
Chief that's not enforcing it, then we get into some political mix, and then the new top cop comes in.
It also depends on the prosecutor.
Right. Listen, ultimately,
can say, I'm going to enforce this law, period.
I do think they said it ultimately ended up being is a misdemeanor. My thing with that, regardless of what the ultimate outcome penalty wise, is the thing about setting the stage for interaction and confrontation. Wow. Because you know what happens in our community. Think about it. We're talking about Petersburg, Virginia, which is probably 90 or 80% black. So you're going to have that interaction
every week
with people who are going to be saying, hey, my gun is legal and I have my permit. So now, even though you may be legally on a technicality in the wrong, because you are in the wrong regardless, but now you have created an issue where now it's interaction, and a lot of times how those things kind of trend themselves to end up being. So that's one of the things that we really be on our people with. Listen, the locales, the local laws and ordinances, you have to stay on top of them because those things change so fast. That thing changed literally, like I said, they put it up in July, and by September, it was an ordinance for the city. And like I said, Corey, you didn't know that. I'm sure I can go through Petersburg right now and just talk to people who are gun owners, who have their permit, because it's crazy that, and we even told the police chief, you all are putting that ordinances, but y'all still taking money for the concealed permit for people in the city. So, I mean, you see how that's the ultimate contract?
Yeah.
That you can't have a firearm in a public place concealed or otherwise, but you're taking money for the concealed permit.
But then this is my real question, and Jeff, Sandy, and Markel will tell you this is how I feel. If we have black elected officials, I'm personally holding a black elected officials to a higher standard.
Of course.
If you're telling me when it's time to vote, telling me, orange man bad, white people are racist and all this type of stuff. So I'm voting for you. But then if I don't keep up on my local ordinances, you're imposing new ordinances in my locality that are negative, like you just said, because this now creates a confrontation with the police and maybe young black people who, like you say, Kenrick.
Ultimately, how many times that's going to keep happening before we have an incident? And that's why I was trying to tell him that, hey, we're not talking about whether it's right or whatever. We're just talking about the fallout from that becomes now you're setting the stage because you saying you're not. And you may tell him, but you can't tell an individual once he's out there on patrol how to deal. Because that is letter of the law, he has to uphold that. But now you got a person who goes to work every day. I got my firearm because I want to protect myself and my family, or I just have the legal right to have it. Right. And now you're telling me that I don't, and that just like again, because now on the other side, what you said is true. We have a duty. Part of responsible gun ownership is knowing the law at least where you reside.
Right.
If you do not know the law where you reside, that is about as egregious of thing you can do in the course of. That's almost as unsafe as the other unsafe practices that we preach about. Knowing the gun is loaded, blah blah blah, all those things like that. If you do not know the laws where you live, that is probably one of the biggest. But ultimately, sadly, that is one of the biggest issues we are having.
On a side note with that, a lot of this came about because Virginia had what's called a preemption law, that a locality could not pass a law that would contradict state law. Well, when blackface Ralph Northam was elected governor, he got together with the Democrats when they were trying to do all that anti-gun stuff. One of the things they did was get rid of state preemption. So Richmond can have gun laws, Petersburg can have gun laws, Arlington can have gun laws, and you can end up on the wrong end of the law, even though you didn't really do anything quote unquote wrong. Well, part of the whole thing about the Black Gun Initiative and getting more people of color interested in the Second Amendment is that maybe they'll become aware of this, and once they have the Second Amendment and they exercise their rights, they're going to become more vigilant about guarding it, and they're going to be less likely to vote for these authoritarian and totalitarian neo-Marxist politicians who want to keep passing laws to take away all their civil rights. And people don't realize that they say, well, the Democrats want a safer society. Well, no, they don't, because they voted against every single gun law that would actually affect criminals and not decent people. All they want to do is take away guns from ordinary people, and it makes no sense. And maybe people are going to wake up. I would hope so. But that state preemption thing needs to be put back in there, because you could be from Roanoke and you're driving through Fredericksburg, and then you get jacked up and thrown in jail or summoned or whatever, when you really didn't do anything. You didn't do anything wrong. It was basically a what do they call that? A process violation, or chicken shit.
Yeah. Right. And to me, that I agree with that. Again, at the end of the day, the onus is always on the gun owner. You know, as much as we say that the onus, you know, I listen, who we vote for, things of that nature, I tell everybody, yes, when it's time, you remember who voted for what. You take score. You keep score for who voted for what and things of that nature. I always tell people, especially in our community, stop voting with your emotion and vote with what matters to you. It doesn't matter. I can close my eyes, and once I hear what matters to me, that's the only thing that matters as far as my vote is concerned. So I don't get into whether you know, Democrat, Republican, whatever. If a person is in line to what I deem my values for me, that is where I'm going, regardless of what. And too many times we get emotional whether you don't like this person and don't like that person. And listen, let's be real. We don't know any of these people, but you you don't like this person, and that's why you're not voting. And then you try to back it up by saying, well, they did this, this, and this, and this. But those things don't really, in the grand scheme of your life, how it affects you on a day-to-day basis. Because I always talk, and I don't get into the super politics about presidency, but I know for a fact, a few years ago, my fuel was a lot cheaper than it is right now. And I don't care. And I don't care how it got that way. All I know is because when you say it, everybody try to justify, oh, well, he did this or whatever. I don't care. I know that a few years ago, my fuel was this, and now is this. So whatever it needs to get back to that, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And Kenrick, I want to tie things back towards the preparedness, laws, and kind of my beginning quote, taking responsibility. Now, I've seen a couple of days ago, I saw this viral clip of these young guys, young Black teenagers, standing, I guess it's a song playing, they're dancing outside of the car. And the one guy, I saw that. I think you know what I'm talking about, because everybody had to have seen this. He's dancing, he pulls the gun out of his waist. And luckily he pulls it out with no problem, but he's dancing, and then he squeezes it by accident, almost shoots himself in the leg or in the foot. He falls back into the car. He stands back up, looks into the camera, and like you tell him to cut it off. Right. But it goes back to that safety, and then having however many people that were standing around him. Right. They might not have had weapons on them, know anything about gun safety, and for this person to be reckless in that situation, thinking they're having fun, thinking they're in control of a situation. So the preparedness, he wasn't prepared for the situation there. And it makes me think about, when it comes to laws, how far or what type of laws can we really inflict? What's reasonable enough? I guess my question to you would be, do you think it should be required that, of course, if you go purchase a gun, before even being able to purchase it, you should be required to take at least a standardized test or something like that, just to show that you can actually hold it, not pull it out of your waist?
See, my thing about that is, that's that fine line that we navigate between your rights and things of nature, because you know, the right to protect yourself, because, okay, we'll say that, but we won't ever say that if you carry a knife. Hell, if you carry a sword, you ain't going to say that. Right. You understand? So we can't be selective. And that's why when I do my training, the guys that I talk with, we always talk about everything is a tool. You are the weapon. So now, right. So that is the main focus of how we project ourselves when we're talking about safety and things of that nature. And ultimately, the duty you have to yourself, it is something that you have to dignify with the training and things of that nature. Because, again, you can go get your license real easy. DMV is set up to give people their license. People think, oh, you had to take a test. DMV is set up. If you've been in transportation long enough, and Corey, you know this, they are set up because they make money. They want you to have your license. I always tell guys, they're like, oh, the DMV trying to screw. No, they're not. DMV makes money for the state by you having your license, by people getting tickets. That's all they want. So they want you to have unless you just super egregious 3-4 time drunk driver, and even then they'll put a damn thing on. Even then they'll put something on your damn car where you got to breathe into it to drive. They'll do whatever to keep you rolling. Yeah, you understand? So what I tell people is, when it gets to that point, that's why I always say the onus is always on the person. You have to make the decision. Again, it goes back to life choice, lifestyle. And I always say that once you make that choice, you have to take everything that goes along with it. But your duty to protect yourself and your family, I like to tell people we want to separate the firearm from that duty. Because you don't get, listen, I tell a person, whether you like a firearm or not, that doesn't take away the fact that your duty to protect yourself and your family is there. Now, for me, I want the biggest advantage I could have over anybody looking to do harm to me or my family.
Yep,
but
absolutely.
Even if I did not like, want, or have firearm, that does not usurp the fact that your duty to yourself and your family is non-negotiable. So that is kind of the thing where when I talk to people, because I've had a lot of people that come through the movement and it's like, well, I don't really like firearms or whatever the case may be, but you want to protect yourself and your family. Yes. Okay. Have you done anything else? Because there's non-lethal. There's sciences, boxing, whatever. There's a bunch of things you can do, but you can't tell me you're not doing nothing. Yeah. You understand? Right. So that is the main thing. So, but swinging back around to your question, when they talk about common sense, when they say common sense gun laws and things of that nature, to me, the only thing I'm willing to wholeheartedly get into is the mental health aspect of what's going on. Okay. Right. That's the one thing that I would say, that if you have been deemed mentally unfit or any kind of that zone at that point, because and I had this discussion with a guy who has a mentally challenged child, and he's going to say, well, you can't say that or whatever, but you want the government or the state to take care of them on that end, but don't regulate them from getting a firearm. You can't have it both ways. You understand? So I said, so if you're willing to allow them to either support you, because they're going, they subsidize you with money and programs and things of that nature for that. But if they tell him that he can't have a firearm, oh no, you're infringing on his rights. So we can't be convenient with our argument. So to me, common sense only for me would be within the mental health aspect. I would say that now the duty to get training, that has to be something that happens. Would I be upset if they required training? No, I would not. Because at the end of the day, even if it was something at the bare minimum, because at the bare minimum, you got to do certain things to get a driver's license.
Be able to pull it out of your waist. Be able to pull it up without shooting yourself.
Listen, and that's the thing. Unfortunately, a lot of times we deal with people that come to class. Yeah, I can shoot. Yeah, I can. And you see them, and I always tell people, anybody can pull the trigger. Anybody can pull the trigger. But it's those things you do before and leading up to is the difference, because the negligence is not just pulling the trigger. The negligence is flagging somebody. The negligence is not knowing your target or what's behind it, or passing it. And that's so see, I always tell people, we get so caught up in, I know how to shoot. And I hear that all the time. Hey, I know how to shoot. But then listen to me. I deal with so many people on different levels of firearm proficiency that if I just hand a person a firearm, I would instantly kind of know where they are in relations to whether and this person could be a crack shot. But because listen, for one shot, anybody, I've seen people who have never shot a gun before, one shot and put that joint right on bullseye. So if you can show somebody that bunt, that everyday handling of a firearm, because that same person would do that and would turn around and flag somebody with the gun. Right. You understand? See, so I always give that analogy that, hey, the person do bang and shoot that right bullseye and then turn around. Yo, I did that, and literally be doing this. So, so the need for, and the biggest thing about this movement is just making sure that we get the message of what is responsible gun ownership? How does that look? How does it look to you? How does it look to your family? And by extension, how does that look to your community? So, and you have to be real with yourself, because I always tell people the only lie you're telling is a lie to yourself. And when you leave out of this class, you have to live that. So you can live your life or you can live your lie, but you won't live it away. And listen, one thing I love about me and my brother Zach Tactical, you probably see him in a lot of the stuff that I do, is we try to go past just the technical parts of what it is as far as training and things of that nature, and get into the mindset. Because the biggest problem, I'm telling you again, when you're in these classes and you hear people speak, when I talk to young people, is the mindset surrounding the firearm in our community. That is the biggest problem we have right there. If you sit down and listen to some of these young men, I told people I really started to inject my son heavy into the firearm thing because he started to have conversations with me that I knew was above his pay grade. Where did he get it from? Video games, Call of Duty and things of that nature. So he started to give me verbiage and vernacular from this, which was accurate, but I knew there's no way that, because I've been around, he's my son, so I know he don't know those things, and that becomes the problem. Because again, and I always, you're gonna hear me use a lot of analogies, because that's one of the great things that makes people relate to bring them into the firearm. And I always tell people, you can teach your kids about the firearm, but they're gonna learn either way. It's like sex. If you don't teach your kids about sex, do you think they're not gonna find out? They're going to find out. Now, who do you want to disseminate that message? It's the same thing with the firearm.
You as a parent.
There you're right. Who do you want to disseminate the message of the gun? Because they are going to find out. Do you want their friends in the street? Do you want a video game? Do you want YouTube? Do you want social media to disseminate the message to them? Because they are going to get the message. So that's so a lot of times, this is where I would say that I and our movement differ from a lot of the straight two-way gun things, is these things like this. When we're really telling the family unit, like, hey, I'm bringing this firearm into my home. This now becomes a part of my family. How are we going to deal with this? Young man, you see this gun, you don't touch it. Middle son, you know how to deal with this, but in case of emergency, so if no adult here, then it's on you. Because I always tell people, listen, don't act like you've never heard a story of the kids that saved the parents. Yeah. I always tell people all the time, we have situations where in a perfect world, you know, Corey, somebody break in, God forbid, you know, they break in, you jump to seeing kids, wife, everybody good, you go and take care of the bad guy. But what if you go down there and God forbid, you incapacitated, but no one in your home? I'll give you a quick story. I had a gentleman, and oh my God, right over the Delaware Bridge, at that big truck stop, right there's a pilot over there, Corey. I know you know where it is. Yeah. As on the side. Right. And we were sitting down there talking. He actually recognized me from the group. He was like, yo, are you Cap from? I was like, yeah. He's like, yo, we started to talk about the firearm thing. He's like, yeah. And I got like 10 firearms. He's from Georgia. He's like, I got 10 firearms, whatever. You know, my kids and my wife, they don't know how to deal with the guns. They know to leave that alone for me. I said, okay, that's great. But your wife just came downstairs at 2:00 in the morning. I'm in your living room. What happens now? He's like, what do you mean? I said, what happens now? I said, because they don't know how to use a firearm. Right. And he was like, damn, you know, I never thought about that. I said, dude, now I'm going to give you one even worse than that. Because I came to take your TV, but now I see your wife, and it's that. And now I got your young daughter, and that, you know, when I tell people that, they get totally offended. Yep. But I said, let's act like we have not heard stories of robbery turn to rape, murder.
Yep. Absolutely.
See, again, this is why I said, when, you know, and these are the things you probably won't hear me say on Facebook. Is more about like when we're in the class talking to the groups and things of that nature, especially women. We always say, you know, and women get so offended. Listen, that one lady was like, listen, when you said that, I got so mad at you. I was like, because listen, I said, I came to take your TV, but you just came downstairs in a T-shirt. So now it's TV and you. And no matter of fact, you got it.
I'm going to tell you how I ended up getting into the Second Amendment. Because like Kenrick said, I was from New York. Now, I had family that were NYPD. Right. They took me to the range growing up. But it was when I had 3 break-ins. I had a break-in in Chesterfield, and I had 2 break-ins in Henrico. And it was when I had that break-in Henrico, I wasn't home. So like Kenrick just said, Mandy was upstairs in the bedroom, and Eva kept barking. And Mandy was like, why don't the dog shut up? And the dog was barking and carrying on. And Kenrick, I don't know if you see, Eva's 10 pounds. She's little.
Right.
And Mandy went downstairs, and there was a guy in the living room.
Wow.
And Eva was jumping up, trying to, Eva got cat teeth. She can't do much. But Mandy went in the kitchen and got a knife off the butcher's block. Right. And after that, that's what sent me on my 2A journey, because
listen,
they said you have a right to protect your home and your family. And ever since then, I was on it. I was on it. So
it's unfortunate because I actually have a story like that, and it's ended up bad because my guy I knew wasn't there, had a gun. The wife didn't want no part of it. That's yours. He left there, and the guy broke in and actually raped her.
Wow.
So and I always tell when you get into the class, a few core things that I always talk about is we talk about be mindful of your situational awareness, be intentional about protecting your personal space, and God forbid, if need be dangerous. So those are 3 things I say all the time. But I always tell people that someone is always watching. Now, doesn't mean everything's nefarious, because you've heard of the nosy neighbor, but think about it related to today. Someone is always watching you.
Right.
Always. Now, their intentions may not be nefarious, but then again, they may be.
Right.
But if you are moving with the mindset that someone's, because trust me, as much as we move, someone knows when Corey is not there. Someone knows when Kenrick is not there. You understand? Someone knows our movements, whether it's routine, whatever. Oh, he normally come in town, whatever. They know our movements. And I always tell people, don't think that nobody is watching. One thing I hate when our folks say is, "Oh, Corey, what's going on? You know me. I'm just trying to stay out the way." It's no staying out the way. Yeah, we quick to say that. Yeah. Yo, what's going on, man? Yo, you know me, I'm just staying out the way. I always tell people that the element, they're looking for the person that's trying to stay out the way. Because again, if we get into like the safari and the wilderness and the hunting, who is always the one that get caught is the one that's off to the side by itself.
Yep.
That is the same premise. They don't want you in the group or out there live or paying attention or around. They want that person that, hey, when I go to the store, I park over in the back by myself. Yes, that you're the person I want. The one that parks in the back by. No, listen. Anytime, dude, if y'all end up in one of my classes, y'all gonna see a day when I talk to them and people be looking like, why you say that? It's the truth. If we acknowledge good intent, then we have to acknowledge evil. I ain't say bad. Right. I always use the word evil, because there are people who wake up every day with the intent to do harm to someone, or to, at the very least, take advantage of someone. There are people who wake up with that intent. So if that is the case, why should you not be moving accordingly?
Right.
So again, for me, and listen, all these things I've spoken to you all about, this is just mindset things. I haven't said anything about the actual firearm.
Right.
All this stuff is mindset. Because once you get your mindset proper, then it's a lot easier to understand, like, damn, you know what? Like you said, Corey, I'm sure if wife had to do over again, it would have been a lot better to pick up a firearm than that knife off the butcher block. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
Absolutely.
And that's
situational awareness.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jeff,
So
you had any closing questions, Jeff?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I used to work night shift before I retired. I would leave the house at about 9:30 at night, and I'd come home 7:30 in the morning or whatever, and my wife was here. Now, she was in the Army for 24 years and knows how to shoot, but we always had 2 loaded firearms in our house, one on each floor, in a place we knew where we could get to them if need be. Now, I believe, people say lock up your guns, but there are certain times when something goes bump in the night, You don't want to be fiddle farting around with trying to,
Hello.
open a safe and
Hello. Say that again.
you have to. But
Yeah.
see, we don't have children. We didn't have children living with us, so that's different. When you've got 7 and 8-year-old kids in the house, that really changes the whole dynamic of it, and that's why there's no one size fits all situation. But if you have to be responsible, but the bad guys, we as good guys, we have to be right all the time. The bad guy only has to be right once.
That's it.
Just like a terrorist, they
That's
only
it.
need to be right once. And
I agree with that. I agree with that 200%.
Yep.
I agree with that 200%. Your system, I always say what your why is. That's one of the core things that we talk about in our classes. What is your why? Your why is, the reason why you leave your home to come back. You have to live your why every day. Yeah. And our why is going to be different from Corey's why, is going to be different from you guys' why. There's always going to be, but everything you do has to be in accordance to your why. How you set up, like you said, I live in a home where I have my kids, but my kids know about firearms. I have grown kids. Now, when my granddaughter comes, you adjust. But more often than not, listen, the firearm is right there. But again, I have big kids or really have no kids here. So, and all of them are firearm knowledgeable. So one of the things I try to teach families, try to take away the stigma. When we was growing up, they told us, hey, you see that? Don't touch that. And then that became our mission in life, is to touch it. You understand? When they tell you, hey, listen, don't touch. So now what you do is you incorporate them to whatever level they are, but to take that kind of demystify away from that, because once you really do it, you will realize that becomes nothing. Because I always tell people, negligence, you say firearm, but you got 100 knives in your house. How come they don't touch the knife? Because you can do as much damage to someone with a knife than you can with a firearm, same way. Negligence and responsibility are the same, are in the same boat. So we just tell people, you have to live your reality and everything that comes along with it. I can't say, hey, I want a gun to protect my family, but I'm hiding it from the family. Right. Because now then they're not being a responsible gun owner. Part of responsible gun ownership is everyone that is authorized to use the firearm should be knowledgeable up to a certain level. Right. Some kids are, hey, you see that firearm, you get away from it, you go get a parent or an adult. Other kids, like I said, my son, even when he was in his teens, he was authorized to use it in case of an emergency, not for whatever. And then, listen, let's be real. There's some adults that are not authorized to use the firearm. So when we say any person that's authorized, you have to take into account. And that's why I always tell people, don't bank on the fact that a person is grown, that all of a sudden that means that they're authorized. Right. Yeah. Because if they don't know, they don't know. Right. And most of these videos you see, it ain't 9 and 10-year-olds that's having negligent discharges. It's grown people. Yep. Matter of fact, I'm actually about to put a video up of this guy. He's actually clearing the gun, loaded it back up, cleared it again, and shot himself in the foot. And he got officer on the back of his shirt.
Wow.
So
Markel, any closing remarks, Markel?
Man, I definitely enjoyed this conversation, and I'm thinking about what you said about mindset, and that's powerful. In my industry, that's one of the most important things when I'm trying to show people how to do things online. The mindset is everything. And you think about in your industry with the gun, people look at it as a weapon. Experienced people look at it as a tool. Right. In my industry, I look at being able to build a website as a tool. Right. Now, it could be used as a weapon too. People don't talk about that or whatever, but I think about the power that a person with certain skills and the ability to use certain tools have. I think about it like this. I can build a website, put a picture up. You think that it's a doctor website, and somebody could be selling you imitation drugs or something like that. Yeah, that's where mindset comes in. and having the right people using the right tools the right way. So anything can become dangerous in the wrong hands. So I'm glad that you brought up the mindset, because I always tell people that a lot of skills are interchangeable or able to be applied from one situation to another, or the way I usually put it is, how you do anything is how you do everything.
That's true.
In a lot of cases, you could
definitely transferable. I mean, listen, you into that. I actually am. I might probably go end up getting with you now that we in this zone, because I want to do some different things because I haven't had an official website. I got some domains and things of that nature, but I want to kind of get in that zone to where I want to take it to that part too. So I definitely will. You'll be hearing from me.
And I was going to ask you about that aspect of like your marketing. That was the second part of it too. Like when it comes to you have a mission to educate people on the guns, but when it comes to your store and the products, do you find that it's more people that support based on just the support of guns, or people that just like the fashion? And I think is your marketing?
A lot of it is the movement itself. But then you have it is a separation, because there are some people, oh, that just look hot, or oh, you know what, that's catchy for a gun thing, and stuff. So I would say initially the majority of my support has been people who have come through the movement, so they know what I'm about, so they are supporting the movement itself. But now it's kind of spreading to where, that look dope, or like, look, see, I'm always, be always repping, or you have that on. So the brand itself is kind of moving, and that's kind of where I want to develop the next stage of what's going on. So at some point we definitely can get together and talk about that, because I'm more of I used to do party promoting. So my party, so I'm the flyers. I'm a flyer guy. So that type of. I used to throw parties on Circle Line. Circle Line back in.
Doing it on the Circle Line.
Yeah, I used to have a big boat ride on the Circle Line. Yeah, man, right around Father's Day. Yeah, okay. So I know the kind of grassroots type of thing. Right. But this whole thing now with the internet and just trying to really get it out there and do it proper. Yeah, I definitely and me, I'm a knowledge person. As much as we can get in, and especially amongst like-minded, always. Yeah. For me, it's always. Yeah.
Well, definitely Markel is the man. He's the marketing online guru, helping me with a lot of stuff. So y'all two are definitely connect. Kenrick, if you want to get in contact with you, what's your Facebook, your telephone number, your email, and Markel will splash it on the bottom for when we edit. But can you give us that now?
Okay. Obviously, my name is Kenrick Morgan, 804-704-0388. You can find me at Black Gun Initiative. My email, bginitiative2020@gmail. We on Instagram, Black Gun Initiative. We on are we on Twitter? Yes, we on Twitter too. Black Gun Initiative. We on TikTok. For however long TikTok is still rocking, we on TikTok as well. Our BGI. So Black Gun Initiative, Kenrick Morgan, get at us. The message, the movement. We always did.
I got you. Well, when we get home, I got some people that need to take a concealed class. So I definitely gonna holler at you.
Listen, talk to me, man. We always ready.
I got you. Well, look, man. Again, this has been Toss Over Drinks. Our guest Kenrick Morgan, Black Gun Initiative. He's talking about the mindset you need to be in, not only just for gun ownership, but for a lot of responsible adult activities. My name is Corey Fauconier. As always, my partner in justice, the guy Markel Prines, and my brother of another color out there in Germany, Jeff Kleb. We thank all of you gentlemen for being with us. Y'all catch us, Toss Over Drinks, everything social media, tossoverdrinks@gmail.com, and we'll check y'all on the next episode. Peace. We're going.
Gentlemen.
Dr. Q's Fresh Breath Club for brighter smiles and maximum oral health. Made from 100% sustainable bamboo, it provides fresh breath for the whole family, grandparents, parents, and children. Buy once or subscribe to join the club. Fresh breath awaits at drqsfreshbreathclub.com. Shop now. Dr. Q's Fresh Breath Club.